So, good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Rabbi Sarna. It's amazing to see you, and let's just do this so everyone gets to see you. How are you?
Thank God, I'm doing really well. I'd be doing better if I would still have occasion to see you at weddings.
I know, I know. It seems like that's the only time that we've ever seen each other in the last 25 years. And I really will try not to revert back into a 16, to like a teenager, as sometimes when like old friends get together, they, tend to revert back to the age that they were friends. So you're an upstanding rabbi. I'm semi.
upstanding cantor and
So
inspire of the masses.
it's on the line. Anyways, the first thing that I would actually like to do is I would like to introduce you to the rabbi of our synagogue, Rabbi Aubrey Glazer,
Oh wow!
who is on the line with us as well. And
Yehuda, welcome. Baruch haba.
Thank you very much for having me.
yeah, and I thought it would be really nice just to chat and just to hear of all the amazing things that you're up to and that you've been up to. Our show, just like every synagogue and every organization, is really trying to bring exciting, engaging content to the community, certainly a community that you know well. And before you got on, they were asking me how we know each other. So I said, let's wait for the rabbi to come on, and then we will get into it. So as an introduction, I will say that Yehuda and I, Rabbi Sarna and I, have known each other for probably 38 years or so, since we were about 7 or 8. I am a year older. I was in the grade ahead at Hebrew Academy, and Rabbi Sarna grew up in Hampstead, Dufferin Road. And I will say that his home was one of those houses, and I'm sure still is, where they had an open door policy. All the hangouts were at his house. All the color war meetings happened at his house, day or night, no matter what time. It was that type of house that you immediately felt at home in. And Yehuda and I were friends on the basketball court, in Gemara classes, and sadly after high school, people go on to different paths in life. And I'm especially curious to hear about your path. So would you mind telling us a bit about sort of like after high school, what made you want to become a rabbi, sort of the path that you took to become a rabbi, and let's just take it from there?
Well, first of all, this is a great honor, and true to what Adam just said, I am going to have to resist from reverting back to my 16-year-old self. I just do have to say a few things about your great spiritual leader. The first is that, hands down, when I was in 7th grade, he was in 8th grade, he was the best player on the Hebrew Academy Bullets. Any game that Adam could not show up to, it was guaranteed that we would lose. He had this one head fake, and it was just, he was unstoppable. So he was just, and I learned so much from him as I was coming into the game. It's not just about the technical aspects of the game, but it's about really what it means to play on a team, which I learned from Adam. And I'm just so grateful for, even though it's been only able to touch base at different points. Those points have been critical. Adam played at my siblings' weddings, and like you mentioned, many other weddings that we've had an opportunity to attend together. So it's really it's a great honor, great honor to be here. The other thing is that, which I just wanted to say, is that, and some of this I'll come to later, growing up in Montreal has been an ongoing well. It's a well of inspiration. It's a well of memories. It's an amazing network. And I'll tell you just a few very quick stories that happened literally in the past week or two, where the Montreal Jewish community, even though I grew up there, but I basically left when I was age 17. just the friendships and the power of the Montreal Jewish community keeps coming back. So last Monday, I spoke at my first Knesset hearing. The way it works is that the Knesset obviously has the parliamentarians, and then there are a few parliamentarians who have the ability to convene a hearing, and then of that, there are a few people who also can convene subcommittees. Anyway, there is a new Knesset member who's in the Knesset for the very first time, who lived in Montreal for a good number of years, whose name is Michal Cutler-Wunsch. Her father, Irwin Cutler, is, I'm sure, familiar to everybody. And Michal has been one of the people, even in her short time in the Knesset, who has been most proactive in surfacing issues of Israel diaspora relations. And so she decided to start a subcommittee meeting on on UAE Israel relations. And then in a short amount of time, that attracted so much attention that it got bumped up to a committee hearing, which then involved even more members of Knesset. And in all of our conversations leading up to the hearing and our discussions afterwards, it was clear that there is a certain kind of Montreal Jewish community sensibility that people who grew up there, I think, have, which is generally speaking, of course, there are exceptions, but there really is a sense of connectedness, of feeling connected to the other, and being able to see the big picture. Some of the territoriality that sometimes, and I'm sure it exists to a certain extent, but some of the territoriality or like the ego, persona-driven stuff that you have in other places, really, Montreal Jewish community, that's one of the things that I remember from my growing up there, was really something that we took. And I saw that actually in Michal's remarks and in all of our conversations before and afterwards. And I hope to involve her in an ongoing basis in some of the activities that are going on there. The other connection was to the Canadian ambassador to the United Arab Emirates, who is a Montreal native. Her name is Marcy Grossman. Her Hebrew name is Malka. And Marcy originally went there as a consul general in Dubai, and then a year ago was appointed as ambassador. It was promoted to the rank of ambassador. And Marcy has been such an extraordinary, I can't say ally. I mean, she's so in it. She's so much a part of the leadership of the Jewish community there. And over the past few months has really been very vocal about her Jewish identity, about the important role that Canada should play in the region. All I have to do is just take a minute, Google Marcy Grossman, and you'll see some of the things that she's written, tweeted, etc. Truly, truly extraordinary leader. And I believe in the coming weeks, I think we're doing some kind of conversation together with CIJA. I don't know if the details are out about that yet, but I'm sure they'll be publicizing it shortly. But so many roads come back to the Montreal Jewish community. In addition, let me just add one last one. Justin Corda, Adam, I don't know if you remember Justin Corda, but Justin who grew up in Montreal, made Aliyah, I think 15, 20 years ago. And Justin was recently appointed as the Shaliach of the Jewish Agency to the United Arab Emirates. I was very happy to make that introduction. Since the moment the Abraham Accords were signed, I called the Jewish Agency. I'm like, do yourself and the Jewish people a favor, send somebody to the UAE now. They really need help building up the community infrastructure. And they said, yeah, but who are we going to send? And I knew that Justin was finishing up his previous role. I said, you can't get anybody more talented than Justin Corda. So Justin just landed actually yesterday, and already he's in action, and he has organized last night a pre-Hanukkah party with mayors from about 10 Israeli towns who formed a delegation and came to the United Arab Emirates. Last night there was a beautiful pre-Hanukkah party with leaders in the Jewish community and the mayors, and there's an exchange of gifts leading up to Hanukkah, and Justin was there as well. So a lot of Montreal pride, I have to say, in what's going on right now. So if you come to visit, which you should as soon as it's as anybody who feels comfortable can travel, just say that you are from Montreal, and you'll have an immediate entree. Okay. All right. Let me now, Adam. Now let me answer your question. Sorry, I just had to show some.
Hold on 1 second, because now I have. Where are you right now exactly?
Okay, now I'm in my dining room in my apartment in New York City.
Okay.
So let me give you the very short story, the short version of the story. It's a very long story, but I'll give you the short version. When I graduated Hebrew Academy, and I went to study in Israel for a few years in yeshiva. Then I went to Yeshiva University and met my wife. I decided to go into the rabbinate. I left, not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do, but I took a job at the Hillel at New York University. It's called the Bronfman Center. It's another Montreal connection, and I've been there for 18 years. And one of the things that it's enabled me to do is New York University has campuses actually all over the world. And in 2010, so 6 continents, okay, South America and 6 in Europe and Sydney, Australia. And in 2010, they said, okay, we need to penetrate the Middle East. And they looked at 2 places. One was Tel Aviv and the other one was Abu Dhabi. And so in fact, in 2010, September, doors opened at a campus in Tel Aviv, right on the Yarkon, for those of you who are familiar, and in Abu Dhabi. And because my role, not when I first started it, but as it became, involved connecting Jewish students to local Jewish communities, and trying to provide Jewish student needs wherever they would go through this global network university. I became involved in the campus in Abu Dhabi. My first visit was actually before the campus opened, when groups of high school students were coming from around the world to interview. Because in NYU Abu Dhabi, it's not a place that students from New York would go for a semester, but it's actually a place that it's a 4-year college where students from around the world would go for 4 years. And I went as part of the interview process. There was not yet a large enough staff of NYU Abu Dhabi personnel. And they invited the rabbi and the imam, my kind of counterpart at NYU, to go to Abu Dhabi. And I have to tell you, I was very afraid to go.
Right.
I'd never been to an Arab country before. And there was one moment in particular, which I won't forget, which was where I was in a supermarket in Abu Dhabi, and I was with one other person, and I was looking for some kosher products to see what I could find. And in a moment's notice, my friend said, can you just wait here? I'm going to go, just have to run to the restroom. So I remember I was in the cheese section of a French chain called Carrefour. And I'm looking at the kosher cheese, and then all of a sudden I felt alone, and I felt this like surge of fear come over me. I'm like, here I am alone in an Arab country. And I was sure in that moment that I was going to get, stabbed, attacked, murdered while looking for kosher cheese. And believe it or not, nothing happened to me. And I was fine. But what did happen is that I had an encounter with my own Arabophobia, which was shaped in part through the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in part through media portrayals of Arabs. However, I got it. I had it. And I would say over the course of my next few visits to the UAE, I started going every year, sometimes several times a year. It was something that I became more and more aware of, and just how off and how inaccurate my perception of all Arabs was. In 2017, I met with this small growing Jewish community, which had just started a weekly minyan in people's homes. and began advising them, recognizing the historic nature of this community, the first new Jewish community to be established in the Arab world in centuries. And in 2019, they asked me to serve as a rabbi, which I've been doing on a volunteer basis. I didn't want anybody to say, "Oh, he's a pawn of the government. Oh, he's getting paid lots of money." I'm not. I'm doing this because I believe in it, and it's been quite amazing things that occurred along the way. But no question that the signing of the Abraham Accords was a validation of something which I could have seen the seeds of in 2010, which is there's a lot of misunderstanding between a lot of different groups of people in the world. And sometimes it does take a certain degree of bravery to build a bridge over whatever walls exist.
Wow. Was there any sign or trace of any historical Jewish community there before, or is this in fact a new Jewish community?
It's a great question. Um, it's new. It's new. It's new in many ways. It's new because really the whole region, that whole area, the geographic area, never really had a very large population at all.
Right.
If you were to go onto Wikipedia, Google, and look at the demographic trends there, you'll see that 70 years ago there were maybe 100,000 people living there. I mean, very few, but or 100 years ago, I would say. But and even now, the number of Emirati citizens, that is, people who are actually citizens of the country, is about 1.2 million. The number of people who reside, who have residency status in the country, add about another 8 or 9 million.
Oh wow!
So like at one point in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, I think it was 20% of all the world's cranes, of all the cranes in the world, were in the United Arab Emirates. I mean, the building rampage is just extraordinary. So look, it's a different kind of miracle in the desert than what happened in Israel. You don't have the same kind of story of from Holocaust to renewal. You don't have a lot of that history. It's a different kind of miracle. But I would say that the one remnant of any kind of Jewish presence is a tombstone. Amazing finding. There's a tombstone from the 16th century. In all likelihood, there was, if you look at a map, you'll see that there's an island called the island of Hormuz, which is now part of Iran. And that island at the time was controlled by Portugal and was a cosmopolitan, as it is now. The Straits of Hormuz and the island of Hormuz are very important commercial. This geographic placement is very important for commercial purposes. So it attracted all different kinds of people, merchants, and Jews who had left Portugal because of the Inquisitions were able to develop a community there. And so it looks like, in all likelihood, either there was a community of people or just one individual, one family came from the island of Hormuz to one of the Emirates, which is called Ras Al Khaimah, and passed away and was buried there. His tombstone is written in Hebrew letters, Hebrew characters, but it's in Persian. It's what they call Judeo-Persian. And there's actually a scholar at NYU Abu Dhabi whose name is Manaz Yousafzadeh, Jewish, born in Tehran. Family still lives in Tehran. She had been going back until 2017 every year to visit her father in Tehran. And Manaz, who is really a historian, she is a historian, art historian, has done now a lot of research on the Jewish community that existed in that period on the island of Hormuz. But in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, we don't have any record. No.
Right. And I would think that those are the two hubs that you're like involved with. Are there other Jewish communities outside of those two places? I mean,
no, those are we're talking about are still a relatively very small Jewish community. We're talking about maybe 1,000 people altogether, maybe
altogether, right?
with residency status. Let's to give you a sense of how the community is developing. What we're looking at is 1,000 residents. Maybe that's the upper limit.
Okay.
And And I would say this week alone, there's got to be between 5 to 10,000 Israeli tourists who are coming through. I mean, there's I think 8 big tour companies who advertise the Hanukkah weekend, which in Israel is a long weekend. 3-day packages, 4-day packages. The 2 kosher caterers which have emerged in the past year. One of them started 2 months ago, but the one that I gave hashgacha on initially a year and a half ago are just booked beyond belief. I mean, there's I think about 8 hotels which have among because hotels very often have different kitchens even within one complex. About 8 hotels which have dedicated one of their smaller kitchens to be a kosher kitchen, and there are mashgiachs being flown over from Israel. There's at least 3 kosher tours that are happening over Hanukkah. So the balance between tourists and residents is something which is new, but that is going to typify what the community is going to look like. And also, I would say that the number of Jewish residents is going to grow. I think within a few years, we're going to look at 5,000-10,000 residents, Jewish residents who are there. I'm getting calls from families, actually, not just in Israel, but all over the globe, who are being asked to relocate.
Due to, business?
Yeah, business. Yeah,
Oh,
people. Some of it is that people are looking for, are finding opportunity, new opportunity. They want to start a business. Sometimes people work for multinational companies. Sorry, my phone is losing its charge. People looking for people who work for multinational corporations who previously, if they were asked, can you relocate to the Gulf, they would have said no. But now they say, what, we'll do it, including a lawyer from Montreal, whose name I can't mention.
right. Wow. And what's the Jewish infrastructure there like? So you mentioned that there's a couple of kosher caterers. Are there shochets there, or is meat flown in, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, somebody just offered to, he offered me an upgrade to business class if I load up my suitcase with meat from pomegranate and bring it to him. So there is the Chabad rabbi who's there has been flying in his brother-in-law to chef chickens on occasion. I think within a short amount of time, the supply chain is going to extend there. Right. A lot of the meat, the way it works, a lot of the meat that you might be consuming, I don't know a lot about it, but it doesn't necessarily come from where you think it comes from. And even in Israel, where you would think, a lot of the meat comes from South America or South Africa. So I don't know exactly how it's working, but I think within a very short amount of time, we're going to figure that out. But I have to say, a lot of the catering that had been done up until this point, where you didn't really have the demand. There were conferences with a few kosher participants. I mean, that was basically the demand beforehand, or occasional delegations of Jewish organizations, but nothing like now. I mean, now is Israelis coming by the thousands. If you think about it like this, Turkey, before 2010, before the flotilla incident, but really they pulled back from their relationship with Israel. Turkey used to have hundreds of thousands of Israeli tourists. It's 3 hours away, not too far, not too expensive, lots to see, same time zone. I think that's probably gonna emerge. I think it's probably gonna end up being several 100,000 strong, as well as from North America. I mean, think about it. Next time you can travel and you can make a trip to Israel, wouldn't you want to spend, do 7 days in Israel and then 3 days in the UAE and then fly back? I mean, it's great.
Wow. And schools, any sorts of Jewish education happening?
Yeah, funny you should ask. There's the Chabad rabbi has been organizing a little gun.
Yeah.
But still, it's at this point still small. We're in very serious conversations with a foundation about building an actual Jewish school, K through 8 at this point. And I'd say now we're just at the point, we have just too few children to make it work. But I do believe that, within a year and a half, so not this coming September, but September 2022, our hope is that there will be a critical mass to start a school. So we've engaged a consultant, we're doing the research,
Right.
and I think it's going to happen.
Wow. Is there a mikvah?
There's the Arabian Gulf,
Okay.
very very large mikvah,
Huge.
but there is a extraordinary state of the art mikvah which is under construction now in Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi is the capital. I would say the cultural center, and Dubai is more of the tourist financial center. So in Abu Dhabi, just about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, the government announced that, a year and a half ago, the government announced that they were going to build a large interfaith complex in Abu Dhabi, which would have 3 separate buildings: a mosque, a church, and a synagogue, each oriented in the direction that they are traditionally oriented. And so the shul is going to be oriented towards Jerusalem. And then and then each kind of house of worship will have in it kind of other components. And because both for the Muslims and for the Catholics, there is significance to special washing. In the synagogue part, we are building a mikveh as well.
Right.
And I got to tell you, one of the best conversations that I was in was about, we engaged one of the top mikveh experts. And of course, we're working with this top-notch architectural firm and great builders. So the question came up, well, where are we going to get the water from? For a mikvah, it has to be natural. You can't pump water in. So where do you get enough water from a region where I think there's an average rainfall of, I don't know, a few centimeters. I mean, very, very little rain falls there. Very little rain. And so where do you get it from? So we explored, could we build the complex? It's right near the water. So could we build the complex in such a way that water naturally comes in from the sea, makes the mikvah? That proves to be impossible. And then the mikvah expert says, and you'll love this, maybe this will be another Montreal connection. You know what they do, and you know what they can do? It's happened several times. They take cardboard boxes to a place where there's heavy snowfall, and they make holes in the bottom of the boxes, smaller holes in the bottom of the cardboard boxes, so that it's not considered pumping or carrying water. They box it up and they put it on a plane. They fly it to wherever they need to, and then they put it on the basin on top of the mikvah and they let it melt.
Wow.
And then that's what makes the mikvah. So I'm positive that the architects were not expecting that.
Right.
I'm positive. But hopefully it will be, Montreal snow, because I know there's plenty of it. I know plenty to go around.
Dude, it's coming soon.
So hopefully.
What are some of the needs that you service? I mean, are you doing life cycles there? Are you?
Yeah.
What type of halachic issues does that community come to you with? Does the Ashkenaz Sfard thing affect how you think about things? Are you, take Kitniot, right? So I'm not sure how you hold personally, but I would think that that's certainly the most popular divide amongst Sephardi and Ashkenaz Jews? Like, are there any other issues like that you find that you have to sort of identify the people that you're talking to, or since they're expats and they come from the four corners of the world? I mean, how does that play out?
That's an excellent question. The question of kidneyot, or which sitter do you use? Um, this was all great. Montreal Jewish community was a great experience for this. So first of all, the most popular languages spoken within the Jewish community are English, which is the business language in the UAE among the expats, English, Hebrew, and French. So a lot of Europeans there, relatively, I'm saying, imagine that up until the Abraham Accords were signed in Shabbos, 40 people, 50 people, 60 people, that's what we're talking about. And people come from all over the world, not just Canada and the United States, but I would say mostly otherwise European, from the UK, certainly France, Switzerland, Belgium, some South Africa, some from other places in the Arab world, Morocco, Tunisia, and then Israelis who had dual passports, dual citizenship. So English, French, Hebrew, those are the only thing I can complain about is not having Arabic, but two of my kids are learning Arabic, so hopefully they'll make up for me. I gotta say, one of the reasons why they asked me to serve in the role that I'm serving in, even though there had been a Chabad rabbi there, young Chabad rabbi there, is precisely because people were coming from so many different backgrounds. My experience at Hillel, working with Jewish students from, some Orthodox, some conservative, some Reform, some secular, some Reconstructionist, some want to be Jewish, some used to be Jewish, some are half Jewish, quarter Jewish, don't know they're Jewish. I think that was really the kind of outlook and mindset that they were looking for from a rabbi, not someone who's going to say, this and not that, and to seek to establish their own legitimacy by delegitimizing other ways of practice. So actually, I live in New York. Since I became chief rabbi, I've been traveling there every about 4 times a year, so once a quarter. And in October, I appointed a senior rabbi to go. Someone who's very, very prominent rabbi who is originally from Lebanon. He was born in Beirut. His father and grandfather had served in the Beit Din in Beirut, and he, as a refugee, went to Mexico and then came to the United States. And he led one of the most prominent Sephardic congregations called the Safra Synagogue on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And he was ecstatic about this opportunity. It was important for me to appoint a Sephardic rabbi, someone who was fluent in Arabic. He also happens to be fluent in English, French, Italian, Hebrew, Portuguese. I mean, the only language he doesn't speak, I think, is Yiddish. But I think we can forgive him for that. And he's also a medical doctor. So in his coming to the region, which is really for him, it's a return to the region, and that's also the way it's being interpreted by the Emiratis. One of the things that when they look out at the Middle East and they see the exodus that has occurred, not only of Jews but also of Christians and people of other faiths, they're making a very intentional decision to try to reverse that trend. And so they are building churches. They've built a Hindu temple. They built just last year, 6 months ago, they opened a church for a Mormon church, and now a synagogue. So they exactly that thing that is a part of our construct of what Arabs are, intolerant of anything except for Islam. That's a trend that they are reversing, not just in lip service, but also in deed. When it comes to some of the halachic issues, look, as mentioned to you, I gave a hechsher from a distance of a catering. I mean, she's a sociologist. Her name is Ellie Creel, and she's Shomer Shabbat, and she was preparing food in her home, and the Hechsher basically went on trust. And at this point now, she's under the OU, which I'm very happy about. I didn't charge her for services, and the reason why I thought it was important and the right thing to do to provide this hashgacha, even though I wasn't in the kitchen with her, was because the community was building, and you have different standards for community when it's really, in its embryonic phase, as opposed to when it's at a different phase, a fully developed phase. And so I'm very proud at how she's really represented. Like I mentioned, she has a PhD in sociology, and she's really been able to use food as a vehicle for talking about Jewish values, Jewish traditions. She has Emirati customers, not just Jewish customers, and she uses Emirati spices and date sauce, for example, and for rogalach. So it's quite an effective blend, I would say, of the. I'll tell you, last night was an event with mayors from Israel, and I heard from the organizer of their trip that after a full day of meetings, they said, one of the mayors remarked, "What are we going to do now? Can we just go back to the hotel? Do we really have to go meet with the Jewish community? We do. Anytime we travel, we go. There's cold soup, and then they walk into what was the first night of the first. It was really the opening, soft opening of Ellie's Kosher restaurant, and they got like a 7-course meal. I'm sure much better than any of the food they had eaten, for the past few months, even in Israel. And so it's been amazing to see how that's developed. The other thing that was very interesting, which I'll share with you on the kashrut front, has been that Emirates airline, which is the big Dubai airline, announced about 3 months ago that they were going to start producing their own kosher food. And Emirates airline is a gargantuan airline. I mean, they reach, I think, hundreds of destinations worldwide. And so when they say that they're going to start producing food, it's not only is it for Emirates Airlines, but they also have the capacity. This is the way the kosher airline industry works: is that the airlines also sell to each other. And at the announcement, the CEO of Emirates Catering said, we want this kosher food to be so good, we want it even to be better than El Al. Anybody who was there was like, listen, don't use that as the bar. Don't use that as the gold standard. So, and they said, listen, if you want to establish the gold standard in kosher food on airlines, go right ahead. So you got the field is wide open. Right. So, though I personally also do like the halal food, but nevertheless, so anything that has to do with hospitality, and that's the one thing. But if someone were to say, what is Emirati culture? The one thing that I would say is radical hospitality. It's in their DNA. So if you ever visit, you will feel that immediately. People are there to help you. They welcome you. They want to make you feel at home, and it's just that is in their DNA.
Wow, thank you so much. And I think that that's a good point to perhaps leave on. Radical hospitality. We have been talking to Rabbi Yehuda Sarna, an old friend, and it's just so exciting to hear the amazing things happening. Yehuda, thank you so much for your time. I do want to leave some time for some Q&A. I know I have some people questioning me privately, and if anyone wants to ask questions, probably typing it into the chat box might be the best way to go about doing that. If you're unable to do that, if you could unmute temporarily, I think we'll just go on a first come, first serve. Anyone have any questions?
I don't have a question.
Okay.
Hello, but I do want to say that I'm sitting here and quelling because Justin Korda is one of my favorite Solomon Schechter graduates.
Okay, so that Rosa Feinstone.
It's Ruth Dixter.
Oh, is Ruth talking?
No,
No.
it's Rosa Feinstone.
Hi, Rosa.
Yeah, Rosa, and I've met with him a few times, and once or twice even in Israel, and it's so wonderful to hear this news. So kol hakavod, and
Well, you should be. I'm sure he'll be very proud to hear. Very happy to hear from you.
I bet he would. Give him my
if you send me a quick email, I'll be happy to share his information with you.
You know, Justin actually had a huge impact on me.
Really?
Yeah, huge impact. So Justin's also a year younger than me, and Justin and Sig Shore organized what they called the Wake Up Tour, and we're going back to 1997, 98. And they had the Moshav band come through Montreal. I was about 21 or 22 years old, and it was a huge eye opener for me, where a sort of light switch went on that Jewish music could be cool, and like Jewish music is fun and exciting, and not just sort of the image that I had of it until that point. And I would say probably changed the entire trajectory of my life, which since then devoted to Jewish music. And so really Justin had a huge hand in that also. So Rosa, we will definitely pass on the message.
Please do.
Yeah. I'd like to say something also about Justin Porta.
Talking, I think. Yeah.
I remember him well from the March of the Living, 1994.
I was on that trip as well.
I know. And he was, he came forth as one of the student leaders. So I remember him well. I'm not surprised to hear this at all.
Great.
Yeah.
I would like to make a comment that I was delighted and certainly not surprised by the door opening and the collaboration between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. I spent 10 years traveling in the Middle East from 1975 to 1984. And no one knew I was Jewish at the time. But when my daughter got married at the Sharazine Synagogue in 1995, there were 14 Iraqis, Lebanese, and Palestinians at the wedding. So I'm obviously very proud of those years. But what I want to particularly comment on is how I personally felt in all those visits 3 times a year, 1 week at a time to the UAE. And that at no time did anyone comment with a anti-Jewish, I won't say, anti-Semitic because the Arabs are Semitics, but an anti-Jewish comment. And for me, that was so comforting. And I certainly look forward to going back. It was my, Abu Dhabi was my absolutely favorite place in all the Middle East. So you're in a very lucky spot, Yehuda, and good luck.
Thank you, Stanley. Jack Rosenthal has his hand up. You're going to have to unmute, Jack.
Rosenthal or Shakovich?
Jack Rosenthal.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I simply wanted to congratulate you, both of you, Rabbi Yehuda, for your outstanding work in this matter, and Adam for bringing him to this meeting. It was just a delight to listen to both of you. But I might comment, Adam, that when you refer to your friend as my old friend, I would prefer if you refer to him as your friend of long standing.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Noted. My friend of long standing. Okay, I can't see everybody, so if you just unmute and ask your question.
I just want to reply to Jack. It's Phil Singer. Jack Rosenthal is my friend of very long standing.
Yeah,
Yehuda.
yeah.
Adam, I have a question. Jack Shakovich here.
Yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Rabbi Yehuda, I'm very curious about what is the Chabad factor in the Emirates right now? Unmute. Unmute.
Sorry about that. First of all, I very much enjoyed that little banter back and forth. I thought that was very good. The Chabad factor is this: the United Arab Emirates is very important. One of the few places that is not yet claimed or had not been claimed yet. And Rabbi Dachman, who's the Chabad rabbi, has been there for just a few years, and he opened his Chabad house on less than a year ago. So the official Chabad president is actually quite new, and was only officially recognized by Chabad, I think, about a month or two ago. So look, I mean, sometimes things work, sometimes things don't work, but right now the community's in transition, and I think things are going to land in a really good place. Just give you an example. This event that happened yesterday with the mayors from Israel, which is really the first Israeli delegation in a larger scale way. And when the organizers called me and they said, okay, who should we invite? I said, you should include the Chabad rabbi in the invitation list. It's an important part of the Jewish community. So I think that things are, at times it can be competitive, but I think things are headed to a better place. If you ask me, I think things are headed to the right place.
Great. There's a question in the chat. What is the COVID situation there? I mean, we heard about busloads of Israelis coming. Sounds like the doors are open.
But the doors open to Israel. The doors also open with it recently opened to the UK.
Yeah.
Of course, anybody who comes has to get tested, etc. But you can go. I mean, I think if you wanted to, like I've gone twice without getting any kind of special permission. I went in September for Rosh Hashanah with my family, and I went for Sukkot with my family. Both times, all I needed was a COVID PCR test within a few days of my travel. So you could go, but of course, most people are wherever they are, staying where they are.
Right.
But they've done internally a very, very, very good job. They've really been out ahead on many things. They did not have a situation where, even at the peak, where the hospitals were overwhelmed. Hospitals were busy, hospitals were full, but they did not have the that some countries, including talking from New York, where it was very bad March and April, very, very bad. But they've done a good as job as any. And look, and the risk is always when you open the doors and when you allow for movement, then what do you get? So I think we'll have to see. There was some, but by and large, I went for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and Sukkot. What we were able to do there, we were not able to do in New York City, and also now there it's almost everything is moved outside in terms of gatherings, which is much safer.
Great. Anyone have any more questions?
Adam, it's Seymour.
Hi, Seymour.
Hi. I have a question. I've been reading in some of the Israeli papers online lately that some of the Arab countries that seem to be getting friendlier with Israel seem to be pressuring Israel now with Palestinian issues and Jerusalem, and to me, sort of like pulling back a little bit. Do you think that the UAE would join in?
Rabbi Sarna, I think that's a question for you, and definitely not for me.
That's a good question. Good question, because I mean, I think if we're reading the same articles, we're talking about Saudi Arabia.
Well, there were other countries as well.
I think you might be referring to Saudi Arabia. Recently, Saudi prince said one thing. So, look, Saudi Arabia surprised me about the Abraham Accords. The whole thing surprised me. The thing that really surprised me was that the doors opened wide, that it was full normalization right away, no conditions, no increments. I mean, just boom, like day and night.
Right.
So that was amazing. I mean, wow. So I don't imagine that. I talked to members of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the UAE. When they say what they say, one of the things that they say is that we have diplomatic relations with many, many, many countries. We have 200 different nationalities represented on UAE soil. That is, people who are residents. Most of those countries do things that we don't agree with, but that doesn't mean that we don't have diplomatic relations with them. It doesn't mean that there aren't issues where we do agree or where our interests do align. And one of the statements of the Abraham Accord, not explicit but implicit, is the de-fetishization of Israel. So not treating Israel with a double or triple standard. Okay, it's a country. We don't like certain things that they do, but you know what? We like other things that they do. So why not? You think they liked everything the United States did? You think they like everything that Canada did? You think they like everything that Turkey does? You think they like everything that Iran does? Obviously not in the same way. And so I think that's one of the things that's one of the impacts here. It's like, okay, so there are issues with Israel. There's issues with every country. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have diplomatic relations with them. And when it comes to, so I don't see this going back. I am working on to try to ensure or enable this to be not just a peace, but a warm peace. And when people talk about warm peace, they don't just mean an agreement between banks or between militaries or between corporations. They mean the engagement of civil society. So I'm working with a number of initiatives, institutions, individuals, both grassroots and more established, to try to ensure that that there is an engagement, beyond business, beyond military. Because like what you're saying is, it's true. If the only basis, if there's an ahavat li'abadavar, a love or a peace that's rooted in only shared interest, then as soon as you pull that interest away, then you lose the relationship. Business is that way. You go into business not because you like another person. I mean, hopefully you like them, but because you expect to make money. If you don't make money, you pull out. You end the relationship. Let's say Iran, something changed in Iran. Does that mean that the Israel-UAE deal falls apart? So, but really, that's why there's the engagement of civil society, people to people, which I mean, educators, religious leaders, environmentalists, youth, all the hallmarks of civil society in both countries, as well as the United States, Canada, have to get engaged. They have to engage each other. It's not just enough for Israeli tourists to visit. It's not just enough for Israelis to buy real estate or Emirates to buy soccer teams, as happened yesterday. Israeli soccer teams. It
Yeah.
needs to be more than just business. It has to be about civil society. That's really what people mean when they say war and peace, and that's what I'm working to make sure happens.
Thank you.
What a beautiful note to end on. Thank you so much, Rabbi Sarna, for your time and for the amazing work that you're doing. It is certainly inspiring. If someone does manage to go visit either Dubai, Abu Dhabi, what should they do? Who do they contact?
Get in touch with me. Just give them my email address.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to connect them to the great Jewish Canadians who've helped build the Jewish community there.
Right.
And they'll be more than happy to welcome you.
Amazing.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time, Yehuda.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. It's a great invitation.
Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. I will leave the chat open. If anyone wants to schmooze a little longer, you are obviously more than welcome to. And thank you all for coming. I hope that was. I hope that you found that as great as I did.
Yep.
Thank you, Adam. That was wonderful.
Pleasure.
Yes.
So many faces.
Enjoyable.
Very
Happy Hanukkah to everybody.
Sameach.
Amen. Amen. Chag Sameach.
Thanks, Amen.
Meach, everybody. Thank you, Adam.